Okay, hello, and welcome to this eCampus News webinar, Humanizing and Securing the Remote Testing Experience. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor-at-large for eCampus News, and I am happy you are joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is brought to you by Honorlock, ranked 103 in the 2001 Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies. Honorlock provides online proctoring software and services to higher education institutions and organizations. The company strives to make the online proctoring experience simple, easy, and human. Its on-demand proctoring solution combines AI and live test proctors to support students and faculty while protecting academic integrity. Used by several of the largest universities in the US, Honorlock is dedicated to providing world-class service and support 24/7, 365. Before we get to our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. This event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with PDF of the slides. If you have a question or comment for the panelists, there is a chat function that you can launch by clicking on chat. Feel free to use this feature to contact someone from eSchool if you have a technical question, but if you have a thought or an opinion or a question you have for the panelists, you can use it there too. With these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with some introductions. First, Peter Burrell. He is the associate professor at the University of Cincinnati. A 1984 graduate of Notre Dame Law School, Peter has been a lawyer for more than 35 years and a professor teaching law to undergraduate and graduate business students at the University of Cincinnati for over 25 years. In 2018, he was honored to receive the Michael Dean Excel Teaching Award. He has also served on the Teaching Excellence Committee and the Faculty Senate during his tenure at UC. Also with us today, Jordan Adair. Jordan is the Vice President of Product at Honorlock. Jordan began his career in education as an elementary and middle school teacher. After transitioning into ed tech, he joined Honorlock, where he focuses on delivering products designed to empower instructors and improve the student experience. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. As we get started, as we get started here, I know I've been doing several of these conversations over the course of the past 24 months, and unfortunately, we still need to talk about things within the context of the pandemic. I know the techniques and the technologies that Honorlock has were in existence BP before the pandemic, but a lot of them weren't really utilized until we kind of were thrust into what I call this great beta test of education and education technology with that abrupt move to remote learning, and now back to whatever this hybrid situation we have here is. I think maybe if we start off today, Peter, if you can talk a little bit about your experiences, let's say, that Friday the 13th, 2020 seems to be the week when the NBA shut down. That's when I personally knew that something crazy was going on. Talk a little bit about how your life, your experience, your professional experience has shifted there, and how you've used that time to shift the way in which you interact with your students.
Absolutely. That's a great jumping off point. And I'll skip this brief introduction because you had already covered it. I'll kind of circle back as we talk a little bit more, but Jordan, you can flip to the next slide. Kevin, I think that was a really good place to start, because I think we all remember. For me, it was March 12th. The next day, I actually left for a trip out to Portland, Oregon from Cincinnati, Ohio. But I remember talking to my students that morning, March 12th. They canceled spring break, et cetera, and I told them really not to expect to be back on campus the rest of the semester. So part of that spring break was spent trying to figure out how it was going to go online very abruptly. I can tell you that while I was aware of online teaching, I've been an in-person educator my entire career since 1993, and I never, ever thought I was going to teach online, never wanted to. And so I'm sure some of you are in that same, same situation where this wasn't something you wanted to do, but it was forced upon us. And I wouldn't say I'm not tech savvy. I kind of dabble in it. So it took me a while to get up to speed. I actually had an online version of my course that I had never moderated, but I had done the content for it. So over that, longer spring break, one of the things that became important to think about was how are we going to do assessments and tests? And so my first adjustment when it came to assessments was, okay, well, I can't just give my typical multiple choice true false test because I really wasn't aware of online testing. And I just went to a short answer essay. I teach at a fairly large university, and typically I'm teaching about 300 or 400 students every semester. As you can imagine, grading that many short answer, we had probably 2 or 3 assessments left, really became a nightmare. So over the summer, when it became clear that we were going to be online the whole following fall semester, I realized that doing assessments, I was going to have to start doing something different. I still had not discovered any online proctoring services until literally about a week after I started fall semester. So this is in late August 2020. I had 500 students I was teaching that semester because of the online situation. One of my students alerted me to a group text that had been circulated amongst a number of my students in that semester, basically saying, hey, if we're going to make this work, let's all work together and see if we can game the system. So I realized I was going to have to do something so that we could preserve academic integrity. And that is when I started looking at online proctoring services, talked to some of my colleagues and some of the folks in our IT department, and they suggested that I look into Honorlock. I researched it, I went online, I spoke with some of the representatives, I got comfortable with it, and I let the students know, I think within the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the new semester at that time, that we were going to be doing online proctoring. One of the things that I learned from speaking with the Honorlock folks is just how this works. And I have nothing but really good things to say about the folks at Honorlock. They held my hand. They made it as easy as possible. Not sure what everyone uses for a learning management system, but we were on Canvas at the time. It just moved to that learning management system about 2 years before that. It was pretty seamless to integrate Honorlock into the learning management system. And what I tried to communicate with my students at this point in time was what was going to happen, because frankly, not many of them knew what a proctored online exam was. One of the things that I think that we all know as educators, that communication is absolutely critical when we're talking about something new, which is more than just listening to a professor talk about their subject area. So I started doing a fair number of announcements, revised my syllabus, all kinds of things, just to let students know how this worked, what was going to happen, and how it was going to be implemented. So I think one of the things that they were concerned about, well, there were a couple of things that I think students were concerned about, and that was, how does, how's it work? Testing creates anxiety even when it's in person. So a lot of the things that they were concerned about were things like, I'm giving my computer, my laptop up to over to Honorlock for a period of time. They've got anxiety and there are some issues with cost. So those were some things that Honorlock helped me with. And Jordan, I'll just let you talk a little bit about some of the conversations that you've had with educators on dealing with those issues.
Yeah, so we actually conducted a anxiety study last year where we were trying to learn from students what is it associated with online testing that is driving anxiety, right? And I'll actually skip forward a bit here to a couple slides, but what we found was there was really three big things, right, that they were mostly concerned with. They were like was mentioned, there were a lot of misconceptions, and they were also very concerned from a technical perspective. What does this mean for my device? Like, what permissions am I giving over to Honorlock? Is my device even going to work with online proctoring? Do I have to install an application? Right. So there's a lot of unknowns, and they were worried about those things. Internet connectivity being another. In the misconceptions bucket, when you look into online proctoring, there's a lot of misunderstandings around what AI does, what flags are, what actually happens with those flags when it comes to results, and what decisions is Honorlock or the proctoring service going to make, right? A lot of students thought that some examples that they gave were, if I cough, I'm going to get flagged because it's a spike in sound. If my dog barks, I'm going to get flagged and it's going to make me look like I'm a cheater. We had one student who gave the example. She had a test coming up the following day. She had her entire family take all of their pets, like 2 dogs, a bird, a cat, and go stay in an Airbnb around the corner because she was so nervous that like the cat was going to jump up on her desk and that would get flagged, right? All these things that we don't flag any of those things. So plenty of false impressions out there. And then last but not least was sort of misunderstanding the role of the proctor. So the AI feeds into our proctors, and there's this hybrid approach, right? The AI isn't making any decisions. The AI is just identifying certain behaviors that get sent to a proctor, and then the proctor can make more informed decisions from a human perspective. The students didn't know what that interaction would be like with a proctor. Is the proctor going to come in and be aggressive, like they caught me cheating, right? Is that what the proctor is there for? And that's not the case. Our proctors are trained by student psychologists. Our proctors are trained to de-escalate a situation. Our proctors are taught to, we treat every student like they're an honest student, because the vast majority of them are. And so the students were very pleasantly surprised when they did have an interaction with a proctor, how much different it was than what they had imagined.
And I'm going to pick up on that idea of anxiety because I shared my students' anxiety, to be honest with you. Just launching this as a way to test was a little scary. And I can tell you that one of the things that the Honorlock folks suggested to me, which I implemented, was to do a practice quiz, which really was like, give your name and that kind of thing. And that got them comfortable with the logistics of making sure that they had the right operating system, making sure that they had a camera and a microphone that worked, making sure that their laptop was charged, all those things that, create anxiety before the real event you can deal with when you do a practice quiz. And I can tell you, I looked at the metrics, and I do the practice quiz every time. Every course I do that first time that they have an assessment. And the metrics on it, I usually get about 60 to 70% of my students participating in that. Nowadays, I think most students have done an online exam that's been proctored, so they're a little bit more comfortable with the idea of it. But I still think the idea of doing a practice quiz is really, really helpful for reducing anxiety with my students. I also want to underscore something that Jordan said, and that is this whole idea of privacy and you're giving your laptop over to Honorlock for the period of time that the assessment goes on, I fielded, I'm going to say probably usually about a dozen emails prior to, especially the first assessment. And a lot of them are, relating to privacy, et cetera. And I worked with one of my Honorlock contacts to put together an email that just explained what was happening and how they really aren't giving up really anything, or at least nothing that they're not already giving up when they're working an app on their phones. And it was really helpful to be able to have that support from folks at Honorlock, and we created something that was kind of a template. I can also say that anytime that I was having issues, and I'd probably say about 80 to 90% of the issues, I would get like an email from a student saying, I can't get on, what's going on? I'm going to tell you 8 or 9 times out of 10, it was because they weren't on the right operating system. And I could flip them off to somebody at Honorlock who was going to help them. There's also, and Jordan, I'll let you talk a little bit about this, in the testing, and once you sign on, there is someone that you can interact with when you're doing the assessment, when you're doing the testing, and that really, really helps students because they know they can, ask a question, find out what the heck's going on, and if they can't, they've got backup with their professor.
Yeah, so actually a couple things. First, Peter, you mentioned the idea of the practice exam and the high rate of participation you get from your students. An interesting thing that we've seen on our side, if we look across all of our customers, the total amount of students that take a practice exam is actually quite low. It's only 7%. And the general reason is that it's not being made available to them by the instructor, right? So if it is made available, if it is encouraged, like Peter mentioned, the students are more than likely going to utilize it because they have questions and they want to understand the system, right? Which is exactly what our study kind of showed. So absolutely, I will give a ringing endorsement to the concept of the practice test. And we learned that familiarity with the system had a drastic impact on student anxiety. From a student's first test to their second, there was a 7% decrease overall, but a 15% decrease if we're talking about kind of like anxiety associated with the proctor. And you can get that anxiety out of the way through the practice test, right? So if you can make your students 15% less anxious, by all means, let's do it, right? So certainly second that notion. And then on the topic of support, we do have 24/7 support, 365. So no matter when a student's taking a test, they're always able to reach out to Honorlock via chat, and we can do screen share, we can help them troubleshoot any issues that might arise. So yeah, that's always available for students. And our support team, and our proctoring team are both 24/7, 365. So there is no limitations in terms of when a student can come online and test from a proctoring or support perspective.
I will make a note just for the educators out there, make sure that when you're making the test available, that you make it available when you're awake. So, because a lot of times you'll get, I made the mistake of making one of my tests available, I think for 24 hours. And literally I was getting, I woke up the next morning and I had, like 25 emails in my inbox. So it's a good idea to make sure that you're doing your testing, during your waking hours, because we all know that your waking hours are very different than your students' waking hours for sure. I want to just touch on the practice exam idea, and I'll follow up on something that Jordan just said, and that is, this is, again, as we all know as educators, communication is absolutely essential. The more you communicate it, the more likely it is going to get in somebody's head that this is an important thing to do. So when it comes to the practice exam or the practice test, just to get them comfortable with that, that is something that you as an educator can either encourage or make it extra credit or some way to get them to do it, because we all know that's a big part of this. And again, like I said, I had really good participation in the practice quiz. And that helped immensely. The number of questions I got for the practice quiz as opposed to the actual tests were it was like a fraction of that. So I'm a huge proponent of doing the practice quiz thing. I do want to turn and Jordan, if you can find, it's just probably my first slide just on communication, and want to follow up on that. This is an issue, just testing and assessments and academic honesty or dishonesty or cheating or whatever you want to call it is an issue that we all deal with. And when I teach in person, I talk about expectations in the first week of classes. When I'm teaching online, I talk about expectations in the online format. And again, it's important, I think, to let students know how the course is going to unfold and how they're going to be assessed. And if you're going to be doing online testing and online proctoring, how that's going to work. One of the things that I try to do with my students when we talk about academic honesty is help it become more relatable to them as just human beings, because let's face it, we've all been in situations where we've had a class that we didn't really understand or like, and we've thought about, like, how do I game the system? And I talk to my students honestly about that. I also talk to them about people that, students that I've had who have cheated, they've been caught. I actually have an email exchange with one of my students from about 3 years ago that I read in class. I do that online as well, and let them know, like, this is just not something you want to think about doing. There's a lot of reasons for that. And it goes back to sort of the philosophy of why do we have such a thing as college? Well, one of the things that I talk to my students about is that college is there to prepare you for real life. So a lot of the things that we do in every course, whether it's the business law courses or law courses that I teach or economics or whatever discipline it is, we are helping our students to get ready for the real world. And I tie that into cheating or dishonesty, that if they listen to the news, pick a news service that you're listening to, or a blog that you're interested in, that you're listening to. These folks that are presenting, their thought leaders, and they didn't get there by cheating. They got there because they learned their subject matter. And even if you're going to become a lawyer, or you're not even going to, you think you're maybe not going to use law in your world outside of, once you get out into the real world, there is some benefits to learning the material on your own, as opposed to relying on some means of gaming the system or engaging in academic dishonesty. So I think it's, again, really important to communicate why it is that it's important for your students to do this the right way. And again, that can, I do this through announcements. I do it through quick videos. If I'm in in-person class, I'll tell stories. Those are the kinds of things that you want to do just to get your students in the realm of why is this important, and then why is it that I'm using a proctoring service. Well, it goes back to the olden days when we were trying to do nuclear disarmament. It's test and verify, and that's what we're doing when we use these proctoring services. So again, I think communication is absolutely critical. Giving your students an opportunity to do this in a practice environment removes an immense amount of anxiety. And then being available to them, both through Honorlock folks that are helping, and you as the educator, and letting them know that you're going to be available, and letting them know that Honorlock is available, really, really helps immensely.
Peter, not to interrupt, but I will. Question in from the audience: is there a charge for practice quizzes? I mean, I guess Jordan, that might be something that you can answer. Talk a little bit about the pricing structures and how those work.
Yeah, there is no charge for a practice quiz. So those are included in the unlimited amount, basically, right? If you need to give multiple practice tests per semester, you can. We're not storing video or data on students associated with practice tests, right? So there's no privacy issues associated with those. So it's really a low barrier to entry, free to use way to get students familiar with the system, and also to there's no reason they wouldn't feel comfortable taking a practice test, right? If they did have some of those privacy concerns that Peter was mentioning in the beginning.
And I do think we had a part of one of your slides, I think, Jordan, that just dealt with cost in general. That was not something that I had any issues with, because I think for whatever reason, there was no cost associated with the proctoring service through my university. I don't know if that is different for different platforms. I'll let Jordan take that one if you want.
Yeah, we offer a variety of ways that it can payment can happen. It could be at the institution level, where it's a institution-wide agreement and the student just counts as a license, and the student has no clue this is going on, right? They're just using it free of charge. There's no payment process they need to go through. Some schools choose to have the students pay for proctoring, which they could do at a per exam level, or they could pay on a per course basis. So they could pay for a course and then they'll be good to use it for the duration of that course. So yeah, there's a whole variety of payment options, service levels and things that would come into that too, but plenty of a variety for the institution to select what works best for them.
And then obviously, if that's something that is a cost to the student, that's something you're going to want to communicate to your the folks that are taking your course.
Now, Peter, any more slides in your presentation? I guess there are other questions that are coming in, but I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to express what you were wanted to express.
I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover, but I'm happy to answer any questions that are coming in.
Great. I guess I have a few questions. Listening, again, you said at the beginning that this was not something that you anticipated ever having to do during the course of your career, and then you did it, and you had to do it. Over the course of the discovery of the past 2 years, are these things that you now see that are going to be integral into the way that you teach going forward?
Absolutely. So I will say this, that even when we came back into in-person classes, I still used Honorlock. Here's why. Proctoring is, as everyone knows, if you're in a live room with, and I usually, like my smallest class is 80 students, you're walking around, you've got your teaching assistants walking around. It is not comfortable. And it's not comfortable when you find somebody that is engaging in academic dishonesty. So really, Honorlock is a way to, get you out of the police function. And so I think it's just an incredibly robust tool. And I use it whether it's online or in person, and that there's a way to do that. I worked with my contact at Honorlock to get that locked down. But in terms of this being the future, there's absolutely no question about it. So, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, teaching with transparencies and learning how to do PowerPoint. So, obviously nobody does that anymore. This is where we're going. And to be blunt, I'm a big fan of technology that makes my life easier and more productive. And I think this is a great example of a technology that makes your life a hell of a lot easier and makes you a more productive educator. No question about it.
So once this initially was used as like a stopgap, but it sounds to me as if you're saying that there are a lot the dynamics of proctoring and assessing this way has some advantages over in person, or is in person still kind of the best way to do it?
I mean, I think you can have a hybrid. That's what I've done in person classes is, you know, it's, you're taking the test, but you're taking it on Honorlock in the classroom, and that can be done. And I think it takes us out of a police officer role or a policing role. Nobody wants to be in that role. So,
yeah. Jordan, other questions coming in, I guess, about the marketplace and other technologies and products and services that are out there. Can you talk a little bit about some of the distinctions of Honorlock versus, say, Lockdown Browser?
Sure. And before I hit that one, I did want to touch real quick on what Peter was just mentioning. One of the things we're hearing from a lot of the schools that we're partnering with is exactly the concept of hybrid is here to stay, right? So a lot of universities would offer the chance to, hey, you could take this test in a testing center at such and such time. With the option for online proctoring, you could open up that window. You don't have to worry about testing center hours. You could perhaps staff differently. It gives the students much more flexibility. And a lot of schools have seen, as the students have moved back to being on campus, they're choosing to go the online proctored route if they're presented with that option, right? Come take it in the testing center or take it online. So that is something that some schools have chosen to do, is leave that option up to the student, which has been interesting to see. So in terms of what sort of separates us from other proctoring services that are out there, specifically Lockdown Browser. So what our hybrid approach allows us to do is we can utilize AI while simultaneously intervening live within the test in a human proctor. And to explain a little bit about like why that's different and how that's beneficial, there are a variety of ways you can proctor your test. One would be AI only, right? Where there is AI running over the exam, it's creating flags, and then those flags need to be reviewed completely by the professor, by the instructor, someone on the exam administration side. That's obviously time consuming, and nothing's happening in the exam if a student is attempting some type of academic dishonesty, right? All that's happening, our flags are triggering. The student doesn't know those flags are triggering. And then next thing you know, maybe there is a student that's cheated, or there's a bunch of flags that an instructor has to wade through. Another way that you can proctor a test is through a post-exam analysis. So the exam is completed, and now a human will go in and watch it from end to end and create flags and identify any student that was involved in dishonest behavior. Again, that is very accurate because you have a human eye, but the student is not, there's no intervention. So the opportunity to find a student that's perhaps, maybe they're not cheating, but maybe their phone is just sitting right over here on their table, right? They're not using it, but it's there within reach, sort of a temptation, right? If it's AI only, or if it's reviewed after the fact, no one's going to jump in and let that student know, hey, we noticed there's a phone there. You're not allowed to have a phone in the testing space. Can you please put that away? That's the benefit, right? We want to try to prevent the cheating from happening by having the AI augment our human proctors and let us intervene before the cheating happens. If we can stop the cheating from happening, we feel like we're doing our job, because we don't want to catch cheaters. We want to just create a level playing field.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So it's the prevention, not the prescription, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's a great example, Jordan, of how what you're doing is you're really underscoring what the instructions are for the assessment, right? So, you know, you're in a room, like most of the time I let them have a pen and a pad, but obviously no cell phone, nothing like that. But it, you know, again, sometimes people forget it's there. Your job, your proctor's job is to remind the student that is something that is, you know, wasn't part of the instructions, and they need to lose the phone. And that's a great example.
Oh.
And then Kevin, I will say something, and this may be a little off topic, but in terms of how the pandemic changed, I mean, it's changed so many things, but again, we're focused on education here. And that word hybrid, I think, is really important, because again, as I teach both online and in-person versions of my courses. And I use this AI proctor assistance to make my life easier. By the same token, if I'm teaching in person, I'm now recording my classes, and if somebody can't make it, they can listen to it. So I think we are using technology in the way it should be used, which is it's not either or. It's let's use it if it's going to benefit how we are delivering our product or service. Let's use it the best way we can. And I can tell you, I think you guys at Honorlock have anticipated a lot of how we're, as educators using this tool. So it's really helpful. So as many of the technologies that we're using are.
Yeah, and Jordan, so I mean, in your description there, we can see a situation where a student may be going in to take a test for Peter's class, but he might be sitting next to someone else in a testing center who's taking a test for somebody completely different in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if we have a variety of options, right, that can be enabled on an exam. So let's say, for example, you're okay with your student taking a test in a testing center or at home, but you do want it proctored. You can indicate this student's allowed to take this exam in a public setting. You can even specify where your expectation is that public setting will be, in this case, testing center. And then the AI will behave accordingly. And obviously the human also has these instructions to know how to intervene or how not to if the scenario doesn't call for it.
Yeah, right. Fascinating. And Peter, you mentioned the idea of making sure you have the test while you're awake. Another question that's come in from the audience here. What challenges, if any, have you noticed with online proctoring for international students that have limited internet capabilities? So not only maybe the time difference, but different requirements in terms of bandwidth and technology.
That's an excellent question, and what I actually think it's a good idea to put that out there into the universe, either in your syllabus, your course outline, or in some communication to understand that people may be in different time zones. And how I deal with that as an educator is just I let those folks, please let me know, right? Because we can make it available for you during your waking hours as opposed to our waking hours. Excellent question. And again, you can be very, very flexible with our learning management systems and with Honorlock, et cetera, et cetera. I did want to mention something, just insight I had as Jordan was talking about testing centers. One of the other things as an educator, really, the only time that I would let students when we were in person take a test or an exam or some assessment outside of class sometimes is if they had an accommodation. And so, and that's what, originally testing centers were designed to address, was how do we deal with students who need more time or a quiet room or whatever their accommodation is. Again, Honorlock, makes it all even easier for us to deal with folks, the students that have accommodations, and we need to address those effectively.
I did want to chime in with one addition to that question around international students, particularly the internet capability piece. So our general MSRs require 1.5 megabytes download, 750 kilobytes upload speed, which is pretty bare bones standard. But beyond that, that's what we recommend, right? To make sure that the video will maintain stream. We actually have a fallback option where if a student ever does experience some type of internet connectivity issue, we're capturing still images. So we stop the streaming video, but we start to capture still images that are then stitched together to create essentially a slideshow that our proctors can use and the instructor can also review after the fact. So all that to say, if a student experiences some type of hiccup during the test, Honorlock is not going to pause that exam and say, hey, you've dropped below our minimum requirement, right? We're going to let the student continue the test. They don't need to be distracted. They don't even need to know that this is going on behind the scenes. We're just going to convert over to those still images. And then if the connection gets back up to the minimum level we need, we'll kick back on the streaming video. And again, the student isn't any the wiser, so they have no distractions mid-exam.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the dynamics of the testing themselves. I mean, we're still talking about, you had mentioned, Peter, multiple choice. We talk about written essay. And also, something that stuck with me too is when you said in your initial experiences about the students starting a group chat and about gaming the system. I know there's a lot of education experts out there who would say, well, they're showing initiative, and then actually that's not cheating, that's collaboration.
That's a great insight. I will say here's, and when we talk about academic honesty and dishonesty, I mean, I know that it's sort of beyond the purview of this discussion, but I tell the story. When I was in law school, I did really poorly on a couple of practice exams. In law school, the only testing experience you have is at the end of the semester. I mean, I also describe for my students, if you want to see real pressure in action, go to law schools at the end of the semester. I mean, people are freaking the hell out. So, because that's your only testing opportunity. So I learned, I think my second semester of law school, that the law library had old practice exams, like, exams that had actually been given, over the last 25 years. And I started looking at the practice exam to help me immensely. So that's not cheating. And I also encourage my students to study together. I had a study friend when I went to college. I was a history major. I had one of my buddies that I studied. We took every history class together mostly, and we studied for every test together. And absolutely, I encourage that. So, but there obviously is a line that can be crossed. I don't, group text and saying, hey, what do you think Professor Burrell is going to ask about, contracts and consideration? That's fine. But, during the test, hey, what's the answer to question number 5? There's a huge difference between those two actions.
Yeah. And Jordan, maybe you could talk a little bit about any differences in scale. So in University of Cincinnati, obviously a large institution, you have some institutions that are even larger, and then some that are smaller. Are there differences between the way that your technology is being applied when it comes to, say, a classroom of 8 versus an intro class of 450?
Well, I wouldn't say so much a difference in the way it's applied, but there are some differences in expectations, right? So for a small class, if you have 15 students, 20 students, it's not too cumbersome for you as an instructor to go in and review those sessions. You could go in and watch all 20 if you really wanted to spend the time, and those students very intimately, right? You see them every day, you're in close quarters. But for a class of 500, that's not realistic. You're not going to have time to go in and watch all those videos. You may not even know who all the students in your class are, right? By face or name. So there are the expectations of better reporting by the larger class, making sure that we are pinpointing the most important sessions that actually need an instructor's attention, so that they don't have to feel like they need to go in and watch all 500, because that's not feasible. So we're constantly working to, fine tune the AI, fine tune our proctoring methods, so that we're giving them the true scope of, hey, here's just the very small batch of students that you want to go in and check out as an instructor. The rest you can ignore because we've given them the green light and everything's all good, right? So certainly the expectations from the university, from the instructors, are different. And then maybe the other thing that we see are question types, right? If you have a small class, you can, like Peter sort of mentioned, you could get really creative: essays, short answers. You don't have that much to grade. You have a large undergrad class, you're probably going to need to use more multiple choice. So one thing that we do offer, we have this feature called Search and Destroy, which basically, when you enable your exam, we will search the internet for all the questions that are on your test. And then we're going to return a result to the instructor, letting them know in 3 batches. There are compromised questions, which means here are the questions that we found on a very small number of websites. And with one click of a button, you're able to send a DMCA takedown notice to those sites if you own that question, right? If it's something you wrote. We'll also let the instructors know here are questions that are far too common. We found these on dozens and dozens of sites. Don't bother with the DMCA because this question is easy to find. We recommend you change that question. And then we'll also let them know which questions are totally unique. So even if you were teaching an undergrad class with a large student body or student population, we would still encourage you to try to use unique questions, even if they're multiple choice. And we do have the tools to empower the instructors to have that insight.
And that actually raises something else, Jordan, that Kevin talked about, and that is the distinction between taking initiative and studying. Like there are a number of my questions from my exams that are on the internet. I don't care, to be honest with you. I want them to look them up. Go, that's how you learn, you know? So I don't have a problem with that at all. And I obviously don't want an entire assessment that has every question that's been up on the internet. There's, you know, that's not my goal, but a lot of times I want them to go find that research. I mean, I do that. I mean, I'm not stupid. I know the internet's out there, you know, let's go look and see let's see what's available out there. So that's, you know, but that is a great tool. Absolutely. I think that helps you make a more robust assessment. And one that, you know, I change my tests pretty much every semester. I don't change the whole darn thing, but I change at least 10% of it every semester. So that's, you know.
That brings us back a little bit to the AI and anxiety. Jordan, just in your description a little bit about being able to go out and grab and bring these things back as a student, it sounds almost intimidating, but you know, as we keep going forward here, are we finding that students, I mean, this is just an expectation of what's going to happen when they sit down to take a test? I mean, this is just kind of, I guess my question is, these are digital natives now, right? I mean, none of this, well, to an old fuddy-duddy like me, seems like science fiction. To today's undergrad students, I mean, this is just par for the course.
I think it may be becoming par for the course, but I don't know if it's all the way there yet. Like, so as an example, we did our anxiety study right in the midst of the height of the pandemic, right? So there were a lot of students that didn't expect to have to move to a totally online testing environment. So in those scenarios, it wasn't necessarily something that they were prepared for. So what we kind of took away from it was there was a huge difference from speaking to these students in some of our focus groups between a student that signed up for an online course knowingly and had experience versus a student that now got thrust into this experience. So for a student who's been taking online courses for a few semesters, excuse me, this is par for the course. They're very accustomed to it. For someone who's maybe new to online testing, it's their first time taking an online class, or they got kind of pushed into it because of the pandemic, they were very much caught off guard and had no clue what to expect.
That's an excellent point, Jordan. And I don't think I don't think we're going to have to deal with that again because, you know, hopefully pandemic is over and it's not going to have the impact on it. But I think it is important for all of us to be cognizant of sort of that, you know, this is how it's going to be. And that's why I think it actually, you know, it's frankly, it's good for, as you call us old fuddy-duddies, Kevin, you know, I'm older than both of you guys probably put together, but, you know, this is just how life works. And the sooner our students, you know, the world that they are in right now is going to be so completely different in half a decade. So that's part of, you know, that's part of learning and getting comfortable with doing a test online, right? I had to get comfortable with it. Again, going back to my second or third slide, if you had told me I was going to be teaching online 4 years ago, I would have said, no, I'm not. And there I am. And so, you know, again, I think how we've dealt with this as just on the education level and the academic level is, I think we've done a really good job. And, you know, I also tell my students, you know, learning flexibility is an important thing. And that's part of what that's, you know, this is, you know, you're in the real world now. So dealing with I'm going to have to take something online and it's going to be proctored. I've got to learn, I got to figure that out too. So I think being human with your students about the fact that you're dealing with having to deal with it, or you're having to deal with learning a new technology is helpful for them to see that as well.
Now, one thing I always, when I have a progressive educator on the line, as well as a progressive vendor, I always have to ask this question. I hope I'm not putting you guys on the spot, but Peter, what is on your wish list? I mean, what are some things that you could see going forward that you would like to see Honorlock kind of add into the experience?
Oh, I thought we were going to go to can I get in my Jetsons flying car?
That's
But
nice.
yeah, what's on my Honorlock wish list? These guys are pretty good. I think, they do a lot of interviewing with, of educators and what we're looking for and what we want to do. Yeah, I mean, my wish list right now, they've got everything I need on my wish list right now. So.
Well, so Jordan, you're getting left off the hook. I'll put a few on for you though. One thing in a number of interviews I've been doing is the idea of not only artificial intelligence, but the use of bots in terms of interacting. Anything on your to-do list over the course of the next couple of months or years that might be taking that artificial intelligence to an even higher level?
Well, we always want to try to make sure that we're maintaining a good balance between the AI aspect and the human aspect of what we do, right? So we never want to get to a point where we've lost that human touch, because the big thing that we've heard from so many of the institutions that use us and the students is that human touch is really what sets us apart. So while we always want to improve our AI and make sure that we're getting more accurate and creating better workflows for reviewing those flags for instructors, we don't want to move into the realm of this is an AI only experience and the student doesn't have a chance to interact with a human being, because that's really, we spend a lot of time on the development of our teams, both support and proctors, and we know that matters to the student, right? I mean, that anxiety study proved that having that human there to have a real life person-to-person interaction is just different and more meaningful than an automated message that pops in from an AI bot. So we always want to try to maintain that balance.
Yeah, I can underscore that, Kevin, in saying that for a company that uses AI, and again, this, I've been around for a long time. I've interacted with, thousands of people and companies, both as a lawyer and as an educator. These guys are superhuman. Like, I mean, in terms of the how quickly they get back to me when I had questions, it was off the charts great. So I have nothing but fantastic things to say about my experience with Honorlock. I mean, I haven't used any other proctoring service just because I didn't need to. They're great. So, but that's interesting to hear that in terms of, kind of how they're looking at developing the next generation of what they're doing.
I'll take a second.
Go ahead.
I will plug one more thing that I think ties into what we talked about. So we mentioned a lot about student anxiety, right? So we're actually right now building a whole new kind of student onboarding, student tutorial experience that takes all the things we learned during that anxiety study and addresses them right up front. So being a little bit more transparent about what gets flagged and what doesn't, making sure that we are building in a system check that's more prevalent and the student make sure that their device is going to be good to go. Also showing the student what the interaction is going to look like with a proctor, even if they don't actually have it, right? So let's show you exactly what this would be. So that's our target, and the hope there, which we'll run some more studies after we release it, but we want to see it before and after. We're hoping that we'll do the anxiety study again, and we'll see a reduction in the students that have taken this new practice test, this new student tutorial.
Following up on that, Jordan, and what Kevin said, that would be on my wish list. Is here's a 3-minute or 2-minute, like this is what to expect. That would be really good. And then a flying car.
Well, yeah, we all want those, right? And I knew the toughest part of my job here this afternoon would be to end this conversation, because there's so many different elements to it that are interesting. But I want to sneak one more in, and maybe we'll save it for webinar another time. But Peter, maybe talk a little bit about any reporting or analytics that you get out of this experience. That maybe you said that you change your testing 10% each year. Are you using any data that you're collecting from this that you might not have otherwise in an in-person experience?
Yes. So the answer to that, the analytics are incredibly robust. I've scratched the surface, and that is something that I think like I said, when I have a little bit more time to dig deeper, it's there. The analytics are really, really good. I don't think that's on my wish list, because I think it's already there. So
yeah. And Jordan, maybe you could just give us a couple of bullet points there when it comes to the use after the assessments are have been employed and the grades have been assessed. That data is still there, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you could always come back and access the results for as long as the data retention period is applicable for that school, right? Which is custom based on each institution. But we're also hoping to do more from an analytics perspective, right? Our eventual goal is like an open API that you can just extract all of the data associated with proctoring, merge with your grade book, merge with whatever other reports that you want, attendance, right? And really start to piece it all together and make sense of it. So while I definitely appreciate Peter's vote of confidence in what we have today, we want to make it even better down the line.
Great. Well, I see that our time is just about up, so I'm going to wrap things up here. I'd like to thank our presenters today for a really informative presentation. Actually, some of the aspects are really pretty fascinating. I'm wrapping my head around the idea of being an undergrad and going into this testing center where kids from all different sorts of majors or studies are all in there taking a completely different exam. That's just pretty cool stuff. I'd also like to thank our audience members for joining us as well. There are a number of really great questions that came in there, and that's always a good sign. I think that the panelists are really giving us a great conversation. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. If we didn't get to one of your questions, be assured that someone from Honorlock will be getting back to you with an answer to that. We've got it recorded. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Jordan and Peter, thanks very much.
thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.